of my favorite projects that I've worked on as curator here at Staatsburgh was researching the servants of Ruth and Ogden Mills and finding out more about their lives and circumstances. Some of this research led to a great exhibit entitled In the Service of Perfection, Staatsburgh's Elite Servants, which you can see here behind me. This exhibit takes a closer look at 6 of the Mills' senior staff, including their butler, housekeeper, lady's maid, chef, chauffeur, and a footman. We also have a themed tour of the house that focuses on the experiences of the servants. The tour and the exhibit can only cover so much ground, so I would like to delve a little bit deeper into the research that I did and my findings in this video. Today I would like to talk about the Mills' butler, Frederick Thompson, and his family. So the butler of a wealthy household, like that of Ruth and Ogden Mills, would be responsible for running the entire household, and usually multiple households. In the case of the Mills family, their butler oversaw their properties in New York City, Staatsburgh, Newport, and Europe, including this home in Paris. The butler was the manager and supervisor of the household and the highest ranked of all the servants. He was charged with hiring the staff, scheduling them, and directing their daily duties. He communicated directly with Ruth Mills to ensure her wishes were carried out to the smallest detail, especially during the critical activity of dining. As supervisors, butlers were rarely directly responsible for manual labor, but polishing silver and decanting wine were often solely entrusted to them. At Staatsburgh, the butler oversaw the butler's pantry while the guests and family were dining. The butler's pantry is adjacent to the dining room and allows the staff to stage each course before the footman would bring it out. The Mills' longest tenured butler was Frederick Wilson Thompson, who began working for the Mills family sometime around 1899 or the turn of the 20th century. He was born in 1865 in Cambridge, England, and he immigrated to the U.S. in the late 1880s with his wife Eveline, a native of France. Details are thin about his exact location or employer before the Mills family, but their first child, Daisy, was born in Alamuchee, New Jersey in 1890. Their son William was born in 1894 in New York. We do know that he was in the service profession. This naturalization index card from 1892, when he became a U.S. citizen, lists his profession as valet. A valet is the personal attendant for a gentleman and responsible for his clothing and appearance. It was common for men in service to start as a footman and move their way up the ladder to valet and eventually to butler, so this confirms Thompson had a similar rise within the profession. Another useful piece of information shown on this card is his address. In 1892, he lived at 28 West 21st Street in New York City. 8 years earlier, this property had been purchased by James Gordon Bennett, Jr., who was the son of the founder of the New York Herald. When his father died in 1872, he took over as publisher of the newspaper. In 1884, when he purchased this 3-story home, he decided to use just the bottom floor as a residence when he was in New York, and then he rented out apartments on the other floors to bachelors, including Herman Ulrichs. So it seems likely that Thompson was the valet for Bennett or one of the other bachelors living at this address. One of the important things to note about the location of Bennett's home was that it was directly across from the Union Club, a private social club for wealthy men. Ogden Mills was a member of the Union Club. Perhaps that is where he first met Frederick Thompson. We don't know for sure, but the connection makes sense. Sadly, the 1890 census was lost in a fire, and I can't find the Thompson family on the 1900 census, but we know that by the turn of the 20th century he was employed by Ogden Mills. He was listed as traveling with Ogden Mills from England back to the U.S. in July 1903, and he was listed in the Mills' household in either New York City or Staatsburgh in the New York State and federal censuses in 1905, 1910, and 1915. In the 1920 census, Frederick and his wife were listed at an address that was not in the Mills' household, but nearby at 963 Madison Avenue near East 75th Street, just a short walk between the two residences. While at Staatsburgh, Thompson and his family lived in a house on the grounds. The house no longer stands, but for reference it was located near the carriage barn, which is just north of the mansion. In this photo we see the Butlers House on the left. It is next to the house used by the site electrician and his family. Inside the mansion, the butler had an office, also used as a pied-à-terre when entertaining went late into the night. Frederick Thompson routinely traveled between all of the Mills' homes. He traveled with them to Europe, often accompanied by his wife. His name appears on many ship manifests traveling between New York and England. In July 1914, he traveled back to the U.S. with his wife on the Lusitania, which was less than a year before it was sunk by a German torpedo. Because he needed to travel overseas with the Mills family, he needed a passport, and I was able to find a few of his passport applications, which is also how I found a photograph of him for the first time. Thankfully, I found 3 different passport applications from 1915, 1919, and 1921, the only 3 photos I have found of Thompson. I must say that he looks exactly like I would have imagined an English butler to look. Also, included with the passport application from 1919 was a letter from Ogden Mills supporting the application and providing a reason that his employee needed a passport. In this letter, Mr. Mills wrote, "Mr. Thompson has been employed by me for many years and is familiar with my properties in Europe, and his presence is required for the purpose of looking after the condition of those properties and also after the condition of my house in Paris." After working for the family for so many years, they developed a close relationship. There is evidence that Frederick Thompson was very important to the Mills family, and they really cared about him. For example, in this article from the Pittsburgh Press on August 13, 1908, the family cared for him when he became ill while they were abroad in England. They even paid for his wife to sail across the ocean and care for him, and waited until she arrived to return to New York. Thompson was remembered in the wills of both Ruth and Ogden. Ruth left him $2,000 in her will, and Ogden left him a $3,600 annuity. When Frederick decided to retire in the late 1920s, he decided to purchase a house in Newport and retire there. Frederick and his wife purchased 81 Rhode Island Avenue in May 1928. The house was built in 1918, had about 4 bedrooms, and was almost 3,000 square feet. So it was a good-sized home. But sadly, Thompson died the following year in February 1929. He died just 1 month after his former employer, Ogden Mills, and he was 64 years old. He was buried in Woodlawn Cemetery in a family plot. In the year following his death, his widow, Eveline, then purchased another large home in Newport. This home was eventually named Everdy and will feature prominently in our next installment, where we look more closely at Herbert Stride, a footman who worked for the Mills family and married Daisy, Frederick Thompson's daughter.